Welcome to the AI Applied podcast. I'm your host, Jaeden Schaefer. Today, we're joined by Nick Frosst, a co-founder of Cohere. We're talking a little bit about what Cohere is working on, what makes them different. We're super excited. Cohere is obviously one of these legendary companies that has, some of your co-founders were on the original Transformers paper. And so really this is, one of the core AI companies, I would say, out there in this AI revolution that we're seeing. Super excited to have you on the show today, Nick. Would you mind telling everyone a little bit about your background and what got you into kind of becoming one of the co-founders of Cohere?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so I'm Nick Frosst. I'm one of the co-founders here. Yeah, I guess I got into AI back in 2012, 2013. I remember I was first introduced to the topic of neural nets. I was at the University of Toronto as an undergrad, and I took Jeff Hinton's course. And I remember learning about them in 2013 and thinking to myself, oh man, I really missed the boat on this whole. If only I had been here a few years earlier, I really would have been in on the ground floor. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think about how I really was convinced. I really was convinced that I had missed the boat and that, this excitement we'd kind of just peaked. And, yeah, I think it's really like humbling to think back to that, and that amongst many other ideas I have had that have been wrong. But since learning about them in 2013, I've just been excited about neural networks and what they can do and how they can change the way we use computers completely. So after undergrad, I worked at Google for a while. I was a researcher there, and I worked with Jeff Hinton for several years on foundational neural net research.
Is that how you got into Google? Like he was there and pulled you in, or just...
No.
Okay.
I took his undergrad course, but he did not remember me when we met.
Okay. That's funny.
Yeah. So then it was at Google that I became a collaborator of his and got the privilege of learning from him and working with him. And that's also where I met Jaeden Gomez, who is the CEO and co-founder of Cohere. He was one of the authors of the Transformer paper, and he had met Ivan Zhang, who was a friend of mine from undergrad. So the three of us got together in 2019, 2020 to create a company that's sole objective was to make neural networks and transformers useful for businesses. Mm-hmm. So we've been making foundational models since then, focused on the enterprise, focused on deploying them securely, customized into an enterprise environment so they can get real work done. And we've been doing that now for 6-7 years.
Okay, amazing. And I think a lot of people have heard of Cohere. You guys have a great product. You have your own foundational models. I have a startup called AI Box where we let people get access to like 80 different AI models. We have Cohere on there. And actually, people have really good reviews of the Cohere models. I guess my question to you is kind of looking at the state of AI today and the market. Cohere, it seems, has had a very different kind of objective from the start, right? From, let's say, like Anthropic or OpenAI, who's trying to just make this mass kind of market. Talk to me a little bit about why you guys have done that from the beginning. It feels pretty intentional. Your direction with kind of targeting enterprise versus going mass market, and how you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think it has been directional. So just to set the stage a little bit, right? Like there's maybe there's like 11 companies in the world that can make foundational models. Maybe 10. Every few months, every a few times a year, there's one new one and there's one that stops doing it. But it's been pretty consistent for a few years now in that around that 10 ballpark. We are unique amongst that 10 in a few ways. We're unique in our singular focus on the enterprise. We're unique in that we're not American and not Chinese, and that's pretty much all the others. So that puts us in a separate place. And we're unique in our approach to building a technology that empowers and uplifts and provides sovereignty for everybody who touches it. Like, because we don't have a consumer application, we're not fighting for people's attention. Mm-hmm. We don't have ads in our models. We're not optimizing the models for sycophancy to like keep you engaged in the conversation. We're just optimizing them to make somebody better at their job. Mm-hmm. That's all we train them to do. And when we deploy them into an environment, we deploy them securely on-prem sometimes even. So we like drop our models into a customer's environment, and then we don't see what goes in and out of that model. So that allows them to connect it to real regulated data like healthcare data or financial industries or things within the government, real data that people want to get real work done on. And that is a pretty challenging way to deploy models. It's a challenging way to build them. It means we need to be thinking about efficiency. The number of GPUs that our models take is quite small for their performance. We think about that a lot. And we got there by being first and foremost interested in how to make this stuff useful now, how to make it useful today. Like, we don't have a business model that requires AGI to be financially viable. We have a business model that is financially viable now. And that's just a commitment to pragmatism and utility that we have as people. Like, that's just part of who we are. And that's part of our focus. So we've always had that objective.
And I think, yes, very strategic. I mean, you guys have gone into this with a solid objective, which I think actually sets you up in a really good way. You know, a lot of people talk about AI bubbles and crazy valuations and all this kind of stuff goes on, but you guys have a real business model that's working today. You're in an enterprise. And I think the number one thing you want to see is, like, are you seeing, great result, or companies seeing great results with you? And that's basically how your company will stay stable. What are companies today using you for? What are they most excited about? Like, talk to me about, where Cohere is kind of playing today.
Yeah, people are seeing great results with technology, and they're using it for a really wide variety of things. This is a complicated conversation in AI. People are always saying, hey, like, what's the best use case? What's the best thing? Like, it's kind of like asking, what is the best use case for a word processor? Or what is the best use case for a spreadsheet? What's the best? Like, this is a fundamental efficiency optimization workplace tool, and it is best used for whatever it is you are doing work on. Right. So we build models, we build a search stack called Compass. We build an agentic framework called North to use them so that, it's like a chat application, but then it's also got automation. So you can systematize, regulate, and automate consistent processes. But it's all, it's stuff at this stage that people who are paying attention to AI are probably familiar with. It's just that we can deploy it entirely securely and customize and drop it into an enterprise company. What they then use that for is automating and augmenting whatever it is their knowledge workers are doing. And that's pretty varied. But just to give a few specific examples, right, we have people within financial markets inside banks using North to keep track of the quarterly earnings of way more companies than they used to be able to. So that's a really, tangible, like, financial market specialists used to be able to keep track of some number of companies and create reports on them. Now they can keep track of 2 times that number, because they use the model to help summarize and help write their reports, validate their thesis, use it to bring in information from their internal sources, cross-check it, and then they can be more efficient. We have people within customer support using it to resolve tickets. That's a great example. They used to resolve tickets. I think CoreWeave was a customer of ours. They used to resolve tickets in like 4 days, and then they got that down to 2. Like, that was yeah. And they got that by, there's still a person in there validating, making sure that, hey, this is the right thing we want to say, but they've been able to decrease the average time considerably by automating and augmenting a large portion of it. Yeah, it's really all over the place. Like, any work that you're doing behind a computer that is kind of boring and you know how to do, it just is going to take you time. You can use North to do it.
A lot of our listeners are people working inside of organizations. They've tested out a lot of different models before. Probably a lot of them use like Anthropic or ChatGPT. Talk to me a little bit about what people could experience as far as, I feel like we kind of get in the cycle where it's like every, X amount of months, it's like, oh, it's Opus 4.7. Oh, it's the new ChatGPT. Oh, it's the new, like, talk to me a little bit about where you guys are at with like new models, or how you think about that, or if that's necessary, or, because I mean, I know for like consumer, it's also kind of like a marketing hype thing. Like, this model is going to destroy all the security in the world, right? From like Anthropic. So like, how do you guys think about new models and model progress?
Models have certainly gotten better over the few years, but it's pretty logarithmic. Right. And mostly the real step change that has happened in utility of models over the past year has not been the underlying model capability, but has been the harness around the model.
Yeah.
And that was super interesting. That was like the whole coding thing right now, like using LLMs for coding. We've been using LLMs for coding for years, but it wasn't until the past 6 months that the harnesses were made so much better that it became really viable. And now there has to be an increase in the underlying model capability to make that legitimate. Like if you tried to use a model from 2 years ago and used a modern harness, it probably wouldn't work very well. But the difference between the model today and the model back then, it is pretty minimal. And you might be able to, take one of our modern harnesses, rework it, and get one of the older ones working better. I think there is a lot of hype going on. I think there's a lot of disingenuous hype going on. I think a lot of the rhetoric around this is like pretty clearly not accurate and mostly marketing play. But the utility of models has increased a lot. And that's in part because of improvements to the model and mostly because of improvements to harnesses and to the way it's plugged in and connected and to what data sources you give it access to and stuff like that. Now, we're always building better models and we release new models pretty consistently, but we've been focusing a lot on efficiency. We're not trying to make the biggest, best model out there, in part because we do all these on-prem deployments. And you would be surprised at how compute constrained even pretty established players are. So we're not making a 5 trillion parameter model because a lot of our customers do not have anywhere near the compute to serve that at scale. That's one of the reasons why you've seen those MIT reports that came out that said so many people built demos but didn't get into production with AI. Right? Cost was prohibitive, security was an issue. They couldn't deploy on-prem because they didn't have the right compute or because it wasn't being offered by a provider they were going with. We have much closer to the inverse of that. Like everybody we work with pretty much is in production.
Wow.
And that's because we target that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
But that does mean that we don't have the biggest, best model. We have models that are optimized and efficient and like useful in a real world production setting.
Which is, to be fair, a complaint I've actually heard from a lot of organizations, just how much they spend on these models and the model tokens and how the costs are just going up. And like, it's crazy, a lot of organizations complain quite loudly about this. And so that is a real,
cost is certainly an issue. I would also say that a lot of that cost is an issue, but the utility you get from these things is pretty huge when it's deployed correctly. And when you're not just making a cool demo, when you're instead like empowering your employees to do stuff better, then the return you can get can be quite good. But it does need to be measured. It needs to be balanced. It's not a great strategy to put, carte blanche onto token spends and just say, like, let it rip,
Yeah. This is actually a concept that I think I've heard you talk about before, which is kind of the contrast between AGI versus ROI. Can you tell everyone, I guess, your take on those?
Yeah. I said that like a while ago. It's like we're building ROI, not AGI. It's pithy, and so it is stuck around. But I think, when I say AGI, like not AGI, I don't think autoregressive sequence models are like people. I think they're very not like people. I think you are very much not an autoregressive sequence model. And I think no amount of improvement of an autoregressive sequence model is going to make it like you. And so it's going to have very different behavior. And I think at this stage, like, a few years ago, I would ask people like, hey, do you think improving language models is going to get us to human level intelligence? And a lot of people would say yes. These days, pretty much everybody kind of knows, hey, do you think just scaling LLMs is going to get us to AGI? The vast majority, whether or not that I ask that question at universities or in public halls or in AI companies or in banks, like anywhere I'm going, I'm asking that question. Huge consensus is a no. Autoregressive, transformer-based sequence models are not enough to get us to human-like intelligence. They are enough to get us an intelligence that is incredible and in many ways surpasses humans, right? In the same way previous models of computing surpassed human intelligence in a bunch of areas, just this time the areas are bigger and the technology is much more powerful. But I don't think we're going to get to an intelligence that you treat or expect it to behave as a person. And subsequently, we're not building a business model that requires that. We're building a business model that is instead, as LLMs get better, we can provide more utility. And I expect LLMs to continue to improve. But we're not waiting around to say, hey, how can we reach profitability? Well, we'll build the digital god and then we'll ask it. That's not something we do. Or instead, we're making something useful. We're gonna ship it into our customers' environments. We're gonna make sure that they're getting ROI on it, that they're getting something useful. We're going to keep improving our offering.
I think that's a very level-headed, probably more accurate than many response to that. So I do appreciate, I appreciate that perspective on it.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I find like that really is the consensus. But if you spend any time on Twitter or listening to, a handful of podcasts, you would get the impression that that's a fringe theory.
Right.
And I've asked that question at master's classes at MIT. I've asked that at like all the ML researchers and in conferences. Like I've asked that of random people on the street. It is the broad consensus across every discipline. And the reason for that is that if you sit anybody down in front of an LLM and ask them to use it, they're going to be blown away. Like it's still the most incredible technology I have ever interacted with. It's why I've been excited about neural nets for more than a decade now, and why I've been excited about LLMs since I first found out about them. Like it's an incredible piece of technology, but you use it for a little bit and you realize, like, yeah, this is not a person. This is doing something very different than a person, and in many ways better. In many ways better, but also in many ways worse. And if you try to treat it like a person, you're not going to get good use out of it. Instead, you have to treat it like a tool, like a targeted tool that you can set at specific tasks, guided by your own strategy. One of the best uses of computers I think we've ever created, but it's got to be guided. It's got to be directed.
100%. But is there anything from your perspective, where what you kind of see with AI, is there anything that concerns you about maybe the direction of the industry?
Yeah, totally. I think there's a lot of unprincipled behavior going on right now. Yeah, I think I think if you're making a business and you're banking your finances on the creation of AGI, you're in for a rough time.
So a question I get a lot, so I just want to pitch this over to you, because I know you guys do a lot of like AI model sovereignty, which is huge right now. We have the UAE, Saudi, France, Canada, India. A lot of different companies are talking about, they're kind of worried about this AI sovereignty question. Is something like AI sovereignty, is this a really durable market? Or is it kind of, some people are asking me like, oh, is this just because governments are, writing checks because they're afraid, and maybe they're just going to all run American models through like a VPC in the future? Where do we see this AI sovereignty question playing out in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's spend some time talking about what we mean by sovereignty first. So when I think of sovereignty, I think about it at like a few spatial scales. So I know that the word is often used just to think about a country or something, but I think sovereignty actually, can apply to an individual, can apply to a company. It just means your ability to function independently. It's independence, it's empowerment. It's are you the master of your own ship? Are you in control of what's happening to you? For a person, that means like, are they uplifted by the technology or are they pinned down by it? I think people over the past few decades, have a pretty, at this stage, openly hostile relationship with technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like people hate their phones. And,
sure.
And so they should. The technology promised to empower them, but instead fought for their attention, tied them down, made them feel bad about themselves, like ultimately.
Yep.
And there's lots of complicated reasons for that. One of them being surveillance capitalism, complicated motivating factors. And we're beginning to see that a little bit within LLMs already, right? When you see OpenAI talking about adding ads into their chat, like it's like it risks speed running that. For an enterprise, like sovereignty means like, can they function independent of the market? Do they have something that's unique to them, that's helpful for them? Are they just getting table stakes for being engaged in the industry, or do they have something that actually allows them to execute on their vision independently in a self-directed manner? For a country, sovereignty means, do they have technology that can't be shut off, right? Like if you think about energy sovereignty or something, like if you have a nuclear power plant in your country, you have some energy sovereignty, and there's not cables that can be cut. There's no country that can stop shipping you oil. You have a thing that's powering your country that is under your control. Cohere is unique amongst the foundational model companies in our ability to provide sovereignty to every one of those groups. So when we make a model, and we've done this to use a concrete example, we made a Japanese model for Fujitsu in Japan. We made a model very good at Japanese. We dropped it down into the servers of Fujitsu. Did the same thing in Korea with LG. We've done this several places around the world. We take that model, we put it into their environments, and then we cannot shut it off. And we don't see what goes in and out of it. Like that is a sovereign model that exists in that country, and there's nothing like they pay us via a contract and goodwill, and they abide by the terms of service, but we don't see what it is. And if we wanted to shut it off, we couldn't. There's a lot of countries looking around at their relationships to technology right now and realizing that that's not the case if they're buying technology from America. And so getting tech there doesn't really provide sovereignty to them. Same with a company. if they're just using what is out there, but it's not connected into their data, it's not deployed securely, so they can't give it access to their like real regulated stuff. That's not differentiated. That's not giving them independence. That's just giving them the lowest bar. Same with an individual. If they're just using AI, but the AI is fighting for their attention, the AI is trying to pin them down or trying to say, yeah, wow, that's actually a great idea you have. Wow, so amazing. That's not providing sovereignty to them. That's, again, just tying them down. So we're unique because of our business model, because of our go-to-market strategy, because of the types of models we make, because of our on-prem secure customized deployment. Like, I think we're the only ones that provide that. And do I think that's a long-term thing? Yeah. I don't think this is something I think the whole world is realizing we need technology to do. We need technology to be uplifting and empowering us and the companies we work for and the countries we live in. And we need it to be under the control of each of those people. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited about this, and I love that Cohere has an ability to deliver on it.
I love that for so many reasons, because yes, I actually think you gave me a bunch of thoughts I hadn't had before. Examples being, I mean, I'm not trying to like bag on all the other models, but ChatGPT, if you go talk to it lately, at the end of every message, it's like, do you want me to, like, here's your answer. Do you want me to do this and this and this? And then you're like, okay, sure. Now, do you want me to do this? It just feels like I'm like on a never ending like listicle ad on the side where it's like,
and you are.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. 100%. So, and I think also on the other side, which I know this is kind of like, whatever, this is no sort of political statement on anything, but you have kind of the whole blow up between Anthropic and the US government lately. The US government, I think, realizes there's probably choices they have to make if they want a model that's not like that. And I mean, just all sorts of different areas, right? You just don't, it feels unstable to use a model that could turn on you or cut it off when you're using it for something critical, right? In so many different industries. I mean, finance and healthcare, like there's a lot of industries, these things are critical, and you need to be able to have your sovereignty. So, okay, consider me sold on the AI sovereignty question, which I was skeptical before. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Great, I'll count that as a win. Great.
Count it as a win. Yeah, I'm an advocate for AI sovereignty now. So one thing that I'm also just curious about with everything going on, we have these AI models that are raising ginormous, $40 billion rounds, yada, yada. Cohere has not raised a $40 billion round. I mean, to be fair, most people haven't, aside from like 3 or 4 companies total. But I think it's really important for Cohere to, you guys have made a big point of being, very capital efficient, right? And focusing on what's important. For you guys, what are things that you choose not to spend money on that your competitors do? Like, how are you that capital efficient?
It's a good question. I just want to sketch that out a little bit. So yeah, we have raised, by any normal metric, just a crazy amount of money. By any normal metric, in any normal time, the amount of money that Cohere has raised is nuts. When we started this company, I did not anticipate that we would raise anywhere close to the amount of money as we have raised. For a regular person to engage with the amount of money that we have raised. Crazy. Unfathomable. Crazy. And yet, less than, I don't know exactly how much. I don't know, 100th? Maybe we've raised 100th of what OpenAI and Anthropic have raised. There's really 3 buckets you can spend on when you're making foundational models. You've got data, you've got compute, you've got talent. And in the compute, you've got the training compute, and then you've got the inference compute. We have trained competitive models that are not the best, the top of the top and the leaderboard, but for their size category are fantastic, with 1/100th of the compute of our competitors. 1/100th. And that's because the team we have is like, they're great, and they're persevering. They're working so hard. They're brilliant. They're creative. They're collaborative. That's the reason for that. So we've trained it with 1/100th of the compute. It is a capital intensive industry, and we will continue to raise more. But I think ultimately the sustainable, viable, long-term path, and we are on this for the long term, like we're trying to build a generational company, is one that takes a principled approach. And would our lives be easier if we had raised more? Yeah, we'd have more compute to spend with and to play with, and that would maybe make our lives easier. But I don't know if it would make us a better company. I don't know if it would make us the principled, pragmatic, optimized company that we are today.
Do you think the current scale of AI infrastructure spending is sustainable, or do you think we're heading towards a correction on that?
In some ways, there has been a correction already. There are many data centers which were announced and have not been built. It's like 50% or something. Yeah. There was a brief moment there where everybody and their mom was saying, we're making a data center. Just to give a bit of history on this, right? Like the hardware that we use, GPUs, were originally created for graphics processing, doing matrix multiplication. They were then used for Bitcoin stuff for a while, which wasn't super helpful in the long term, but they were being used. Now, at this stage, the GPUs we're using, they're tailor-made for neural network training, but they're still big matrix multiplying machines. So that's like one piece of hardware that has been used for many separate things over its history. I don't think the world is going to run out of things to compute. So even if we figure out how to make LLMs way more efficient and that the computing power goes down, the world having more compute to me seems like a good idea. Provided they're built in a sustainable, they're using green energy, they're using closed loop water systems, like they're built in reasonable places. Provided they're all those things, I think it's generally a good idea to have more compute. And I'm not super worried about the world having too much. We're not going to run out of things to compute. There's definitely there are definitely questions that need answering, and computers can help us answer them. I think that's a good idea. That being said, yeah, there's been lots of unprincipled approaches to building data centers. And that's why you're seeing all of these big announcements just fizzle. They were only rhetoric in the first place.
That was my instinct on it, but I appreciate the insight. Where
I'm not seeing, just to go back to that, where I'm not seeing is I'm seeing suddenly lots of other countries trying to build reasonable data centers for their environment. And I think that's a really good idea. So I'm seeing lots of countries try to figure out, okay, cool, like we need this capability in-house, within our borders. Let's build a data center this appropriate size. And I think that's a great direction for people to be going in. The same way I think it's a great direction when I see countries building nuclear power plants inside their borders. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay. And to be fair, I actually think it's like a funny moment in time, and everything in AI happens so fast. So it's like happened and everyone's long forgot it. But I remember there was a moment a couple of years ago where there was all these articles going around saying Sam Altman was trying to raise $7 trillion to build sovereign data centers in every single country and partner with every single country to do it. And then it kind of disappeared and he said he wasn't. And I don't know. I have no idea what the background of that story was. I just saw the headlines and thought it was a wild story. And I think many people do. However, I think probably a lot of countries are realizing they probably don't need OpenAI specifically to go build those data centers for them, right? They can build their own data centers and have sovereignty over those as well, like you mentioned with the model. But I think it did pique a lot of it kind of put it in the zeitgeist that, gee, this is probably something a lot of countries should look at and should think of. Like, this is a good countrywide investment to make, not get tied into one ecosystem per se, or OpenAI or anyone, but build it so you can run your own sovereign stuff. What's one of the most common mistakes you see enterprises make when they try to adopt AI?
There's a few. One of them is to say, oh, we're not ready. We need to make sure our data lake is in a good environment. Let's not give our employees access to AI. Let's instead spend a bunch of time trying to figure out how to improve our data warehouse, our data storage. Your data, as soon as you've done that, somebody else is going to you're going to be collecting new data. That's going to be, there's just I've never met a company that's been like, oh yeah, our data is perfect. It's pristine. It's in all the right, never happens. Never happens. Some are better than others and you should always be striving to improve it, but that's an ongoing process. So I've seen companies like delay doing it. They could push it off forever saying they're going to clean up our data warehousing. The other is to I think it works much better when you take a bottoms up approach. Like ultimately this technology is augmentative. Everybody in any organization where they're working behind a computer, an LLM can help them for some portion of their job. It probably can't do the entirety of any person's job, but it can do a portion of everybody's job. And the best way to get utility out of this is to give people access to it and say, you use this, you're in control. You figure out how to use this, put it into your environment, make sure it's secure, make sure it's got access to the right data, make sure the employees know how to use it, know what they can share. Like hopefully if it's securely deployed, they can put any data they want in there, and then say, you are empowered to figure out how to use this and use it if you feel like it's helping you, and don't use it if you feel like it's not. That's it. And I find that works much better than trying to top down say, we are going to identify this particular use case and we're going to automate that particular thing. It's so challenging in a large organization to know what people are doing when and how to, like, they know how to do it. And so they're going to know how to get an LLM to do it. And that's going to be beneficial for everybody, right? So that's I think going from a bottoms up approach is often more effective.
Love that. I think that is phenomenal advice. By the way, it's been such a phenomenal interview, and I'm super appreciative, Nick, for your time and all of your thoughts, because I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm sure all the listeners have as well. Looking forward into the future, maybe in the next few years, what do you feel like enterprise AI actually looks like? What are some of the shifts and changes that we're going to see that people should be expecting?
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing this a little bit. But I think largely enterprise AI over the coming years is going to look like this. You're going to get into work, you're going to open your computer, you're going to open up an email client, maybe as you do, maybe you'll open up Slack, and you'll open up an interface to use a language model. And then you're just going to ask it to do stuff. And your work will feel a lot more like directing a machine. And then making changes to it as you see fit, and figuring out if it's got the right cultural nuance, if it's got the right strategy, all these things, like, making edits that are creative and strategic, and supervising what it's doing rather than spending time doing things yourself. And we're already seeing that a little bit. Like that's the way a lot of coders feel right now, right? A lot of coders are, they're supervising, reviewing, strategizing, creating architecture docs, and thinking about the code rather than spending time writing boilerplate code anymore, because the LLMs can do that for them. So I think we're going to see that in all knowledge work. And I think we're beginning to see we're seeing that already. And we're just going to be seeing that in more facets of work behind a computer.
Amazing. And I, for one, am super excited for that future. And you're right. I'm starting to taste it a little bit, but I think we'll see that more going forward. So really excited about that. Nick, thank you so much for hopping on the show today and sharing all of your insights. If people want to, if organizations or enterprises are interested in contacting Cohere and working for on-prem deployments or sovereign AI, what's the best way for them to, contact you?
We got a big contact button on our website.
Yeah, it's not going to be hard to find. All right.
You can talk to us.
Phenomenal.
I'll pick up
all
the
right. Thank you so much, Nick, for hopping on the show. For all of the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. Make sure to leave a rating and review wherever you get your episodes, and we'll catch you in the next show.